First of all, I'd just like to start with some context. We believe that actually now is the time for change. There are a number of challenges facing us, as you probably know. I mean, big picture stuff, we've got Brexit on the horizon. We've got particular challenges at the moment in the UK political system, which affects how we influence for the profession, how we campaign for the policy objectives we have in terms of psychology and our discipline trying to make a difference. We've got challenges for our members in their working environments, pressures for our academic members in their universities with the REF, with all sorts of other things, particularly Brexit pressures, in fact, for our academic members. And also the TEF has come along. For our practitioner members, particularly those who are working in the NHS, huge challenges in terms of funding challenges, cuts to services, demand increasing, the need for parity of esteem between mental health and physical health, challenges to people's professional status in terms of banding for psychologists, down banding, and issues in services. So there's a climate of challenge and we need to rise to that as a society. We believe that within the society as well there is a real momentum for change. There's been a lot of interest in the fact that we're doing the structural review, and I think we've reached a point where actually there's no turning back. We're proposing some leadership changes. I'll come on to those in a minute when we talk about the Board of Trustees, when we talk about our proposals for a Senate, in terms of how we want to see the society being evidently member-led. We're also having changes in the leadership in the office. Our Chief Executive is retiring at the end of September, and obviously the retirement of a Chief Executive brings with it quite considerable change potentially in terms of the direction of the society. And the changes that we may see there. Our structures and processes need to modernise. A lot of work is already going on in terms of some of that, the changes that members don't see, for example, the financial systems, the changes you do see, the website, but also our processes for how things done need to change. That's an area where we still need to do more work, and we'll come back to that. But we're looking at some areas as well where we're going to make proposals, such as our governing boards, which is part of the processes of the society. We know also that members want us to refocus on member needs. Helen will talk about the member benefit later on in the presentation. But we need to really focus on what it is our members want for the society and delivering that benefit. And I think part of that is going to be some changes in our culture as well, a shift towards an enabling and responsive culture, both for members and for staff, so that we can achieve that benefit. And our members as well want much more support in your professional context, and we know that and we've heard that. And again, we will hear about that a little bit later in the presentation. One thing I did want to share with you, which we've put up there, and that's our new impact statement, which was developed with the help of some external consultants, and is really trying to say, what are we here for as a society? And you can read it there, but the idea that people, organisations and communities are equipped with everyday psychological knowledge to navigate a complex world, and that everyone can access evidence-based psychology to enhance their lives, communities and wider society. So, this is what we're trying to answer in terms of the so what question. What is the society here for? I mean, quite simply, I think, we're here to make things better for people. That's the communities, the wider society out there, but we also want to make things better for our members in their day-to-day working lives. And therefore focusing our energies on two aspects really of what we're here for. Psychology, our discipline, having an impact to make things better for people, and differentiating the contribution that psychologists, our members, make. So, what do psychologists bring to the party? We, I think, are unique in the breadth of our discipline, the different specialisms that our members have in terms of being able to bring to bear our knowledge to solve the complex problems that face society. And I think we can have the potential to be very good at that, and we need to be much more, I think, on the front foot about making that point to policymakers, to government and across the wider society. So I think that is really important. So to sum up in terms of the context, why do we need to change? we need to improve our impact as an organisation. I actually think we've got much better at that in terms of a lot of the work that we've done in the society over the last 18 months to 2 years. We've appointed a Director of Policy and Communications, and I think her work has made considerable impact in that area. We've been doing a lot of work around the work capability assessment, which has been led by our policy team, influencing there. We're starting a lot of work around the children and young people, the schools agenda. So I think there's a lot going on where we are doing more, but we want to do more still. We want to support both the learned society and the professional body functions for our members better. Often I think members have a perception that we support one or the other, and depending on where they are particularly based, they see it as the other side of the coin. But I think we need to ramp up what we're doing in terms of both of those areas of the society. And that means, I think, having a simpler, more agile structure which meets members' needs, and that is one of the main drivers for the structural review. So that's our agenda for today. I've mentioned the Senate body. We want to update you on trustees and governance and our proposals for that. The strategy boards, and we've deliberately called them their strategy boards, and then talk about member networks and the professional body structure. So the Senate, picture of a Senate there. So why a Senate? A Senate, we think, reflects the sense of democracy, the sense that actually we want the society to be genuinely member-led. You may know that we have a structure called the Representative Council at the moment. Have people heard of that? Has anybody been on it? Yeah. Which I think has a place. I chaired it for 2 years before I became president, and the Representative Council has been valuable to us in terms of considering the things that matter to members, but it's not part of the decision-making processes of the society. It doesn't, as we've over the last 2 years been saying, actually have teeth in terms of setting the strategic direction for the society, and also influencing, what are the society's priorities, where are we going to focus our collective energies, how are we going to get things done within the society. So the idea of a Senate is to actually place that at the centre of what we do as the society, so that all of our member networks, and all of our members are in a network, whether it's a branch, some are in the practitioner networks, some are in the academic focused research-based networks, so that all of our members have a chance to put forward their ideas for how the society should be and actually have influence over the priorities of the society. And very much we see this as not the members being ruled by the Senate, but the members collectively ruling through the Senate in the organisation. So it would have all of our networks on it and some new ones, and this is what we'll come to later when we talk about the proposals for the member networks. The trustees would be on it. The ethics committee would be on it. We do believe that it's, for our sort of profession, really important to have ethics at the heart of what we do in the society, and that's something that the ethics committee also very much want to see. So having them part of the structures of the society. Again, rather like the Representative Council, the ethics committee can be seen as somewhat on the side of what we do currently, and it needs to have a slightly different focus. The senior management team too, we propose, would be on the Senate. They would be in a non-voting capacity, but we believe we need to make sure that the members and the direction of the society and the senior directors who are responsible for implementation of that are aligned in terms of how we achieve our objectives. So we think that's important. We propose that the Senate would be chaired by the President. The President is elected by the membership. At the moment, the Chair of Council is elected by Council, which is obviously a much narrower group. So we would like to see the Senate chaired by the President of the Society. And it would have an executive group, which is the composition of which is there. Particularly of note is that it would contain the nation chairs, so Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, to make sure that we reflect the perspectives of the devolved nations of the UK. And particularly that's important to them and to us in a policy perspective, because policy is different in the devolved nations, and we believe as a society we need to make sure that we reflect that. So The idea of Senate being a democratic structure, all members having a voice and a much louder voice than members do currently in how the society is governed and what the society does. Making sure that outwardly there is a much better outward focus to what we do in terms of our policy work, but also a shared vision of how the society is internally. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like to members? How does it respond to members' needs? How accessible is it to members? How inclusive is it to the range of our membership in terms of their needs? So that's the proposal for the Senate. So the trustees have these main duties really, and we've deliberately put up there the charity actively fulfilling its purpose, because trustees can be thought of as people there to make sure things don't go wrong, to make sure that the organisation is financially healthy, to do those kind of management type of functions. But one of the main focuses of a charity, and I think this is quite clear from the requirements on charities, is that they should be actively making sure that they fulfil the purpose they're there for. And that means sometimes having an appetite for risk, for doing things differently, for taking appropriate risks to make change, to look at what will actually take the organisation forward, to make it vibrant, to make it healthy. So that is one of the main purposes really of the trustee body. Setting the strategy for the organisation, but we see that very much hand in hand with the Senate, with the trustees, yes, holding the legal responsibility, but the Senate driving what the organisation will do. Another main focus of the trustees is what they call holding the chief executive to account, which really means making sure that the chief executive, whose responsibility it is to manage the operations and the staff, to make sure that is delivering what it is that the trustees, and in our case the Senate, will want for the society. I've talked about the budgetary and financial responsibility and the governance. In terms of who's on the trustee board, at the moment, we don't actually appoint by skill. Many other organisations you may know from your private and other professional lives will actually look at their trustee body and say, have we got the right expertise? Some other organisations will look to say, have we got fundraising expertise? Have we got marketing expertise? Have we got the scientific expertise if it's that particular type of organisation? Have we got HR expertise, legal, financial, risk management, whatever it is? We don't do that, and we think actually the size of the organisation now that the BPS has grown to, we need to start being more professional in those respects. So our proposal is to have some lay trustees on the board who will represent some of those areas of expertise. We're considering an appointed chair. We're not quite sure from feedback we've had whether members have got the appetite for this, but we are considering, rather than having the board chaired by the president, having an appointed chair who's got experience of, perhaps governance of public sector body, maybe another third sector body, maybe even a commercial body, and who would be able to bring that independent outside governance expertise to the Board of Trustees. But we don't want to lose the input and influence of psychologists on there. So we're also going to make sure that we have our board chairs on there representing our public affairs, our research, our practice, our education and training, but also two elected directly from the membership in terms of psychologists who've got an interest in being trustees and driving forward the society. Further proposals, we currently have an honorary treasurer and we have an honorary general secretary. Again, we believe that with the size and scale and complexity of the BPS, having those important functions performed by effectively a volunteer trustee is no longer appropriate, and actually we should be making sure that our finance director and our chief executive and personnel are fully professionally accountable for those areas of the society. And actually these roles are from a former time and are no longer what we need for the organisation. We're looking at subcommittees of the board, which actually it's within the responsibility of the board to appoint anyway, to look at these particular areas of function for oversight. And would you believe it, we can't actually make a decision even on an urgent matter at the moment in the Board of Trustees unless we are face to face. So we believe that for some decision making we actually need the ability to use teleconference and other modern means. I've alluded to the 4 new boards. You may be aware that we have governance boards at the moment. We feel that over time the function of the governance boards has been rather whittled away, and they've become areas where perhaps documents are just approved and they're perhaps doing more operational things than they should be, and that these are things that actually could be done more slickly and more easily elsewhere in the organisation, that what our boards really ought to be doing is driving forward the strategic agenda. So when the senators set the priorities, the boards will then be actually saying, well, within their particular purview, what are the strategic priorities that they need to push forward. So we've got those 4 boards there. Bringing education and training back together. You may at the moment know that we've got pre-tertiary and undergraduate education split from postgraduate training, and that doesn't always work very well. And so we're looking at bringing education together, and also thinking about continuing professional development, which is an important area for our members, and we know is a service that members really value and want more of from the society. And also we need to think about education, even in school, thinking about psychological education in its broadest sense, all the way through people's lives. And if you think back to our impact statement that I mentioned earlier, that would very much fit with that. The other really new one is our Public Affairs Board, thinking about having much more impact externally, and having a board that really focuses on our impact externally, thinking about our priority areas for that, and taking that forward, and having people on that board who are engaged with that agenda. And then much more as we have at the moment, having a practice board and a research board, but making sure that they work much more closely together. Feedback that we have had from our members is that members don't want to see practice and research artificially split, but that actually we need to think about those boards working really closely together. So the sort of things boards will do, I've talked about the strategic focus, but also thinking about a proactive strategy for taking their agenda forward. But we also know that we need our boards and our organisation to be reactive. So when things happen out in society that are maybe unexpected, we need to be on the front foot with a very quick response to that. And that may be about individual network responses, it may be in fact about a society response from one of the society's staff teams, but it may also be about a board very quickly getting on the front foot to make a response to something that's happening out in the world, in terms of making sure that there is a psychology and psychologist contribution to that. Again, we know that that's something our members very much want to see the society doing, and very much advances our purpose. The other thing is the boards being able to think about, are there other organisations that we should be partnering with strategically in order to achieve our aims? We do this already. We have memoranda of cooperation, and we work informally as well with other organisations. But very often, particularly in mental health is a good example, but also in academic psychology, with things like the Association of Heads of Psychology Departments, for example. It's actually in our interests and the other organisations' interests for us to work together, because we can be more powerful in terms of lobbying and putting forward our shared interests if we do that on a joint basis. And then we will have the boards delegate operational responsibility to the relevant staff directorates, so that can be going on a day-to-day basis, and things get done in that way. So each of our boards would have a purpose statement. The one I've particularly mentioned is the Public Affairs Board, and it's about maximising impact. And I think that really is about what evidence-based psychology can contribute, but also what the role of psychologists is. What can psychologists contribute to that agenda? Education and training, I think probably the main point is that we want to look at education across the lifespan, and that's the most important thing about the purpose statement for that board. For Practice Board, it's about excellence in practice, and again, thinking through to our impact and what we're doing for the public, thinking about working with experts by experience, service users, the people who want our services and use our services, and thinking about how can we co-produce documents in the practice arena and initiatives, thinking about quality of services, thinking about governance of services, how services ought to be resourced and delivered, so that we can give that to our members. And then research, obviously excellence in research, but also thinking about what matters for psychologists in terms of how research is funded and framed, the sort of grants and awards that we give, but also the bigger picture stuff, such as how is psychology represented in the ref and influencing that, and a lot of work is already going on about that in the society. Okay, so I think that's all we wanted to say on that.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about the current state of the member network, so the structure we have at the moment, and then I'm going to talk to you about our proposals for the branches that we want to talk to members about. So when we look at the formal member networks, these are the networks which are described in the Society's Charter, Statutes and Rules, and there are 39 of them. And what we have 10 divisions, we have 3 special groups, 11 branches, which there are 3 in the nations and 8 in England, and we have 15 sections as well. So we have 39. And those branches have representation on the General Assembly, representative councils, and through the board structures as well. But psychology is a very broad church, so what we also have is, from the 10 divisions, we have 27 additional faculties and special interest groups. And these are predominantly in the Division of Clinical Psychology, Division of Counselling Psychology, and the Division of Neuropsychology also has one as well. Further, the divisions also split themselves into 30 geographical groups, mainly in the nations, but also there is an English divisional branch structure, which is in the DCP, so that's the Division of Clinical Psychology, and the Division of Counselling Psychology as well. Furthermore, the faculties split themselves into 27 subspecialisms and 29 geographical subgroups as well. So we have this layering effect of the society's membership, how it's split and the granularity. So this is the final picture. So from the 39 formal member networks, where there is representation through the society structure, there is over 100 member networks which are nested under the divisions, which are not included within that structure. So there are 146 member networks all in all. And looking at that, we have varying groups as well. We have large branches, such as the London Home Counties branch, which has a membership of nearly a quarter of the Society's membership because of the concentration of psychologists in our membership within London and Greater London, through to some groups which have 11 members. There's also a lot of duplication as well. For example, within the Division of Clinical Psychology, we have the Faculty for Oncology and Palliative Care. In the Division of Counselling Psychology, we have Cancer and Palliative Care. So there's a lot of duplication in that way as well. It's in terms of structure, but also our members' input as volunteers as well. If you look at it another way, so we have a support structure as well. We have 1,700 active members within the member networks. That's fantastic. And that's growing. 2.5 years ago, we had 1,400 members. So that trend is increasing, which we welcome. But we also have 94 treasurers, secretaries, and annual general meetings. My team go to 241 meetings a year to support the members with their activities. But there are hundreds more that we can't get to which don't have the society support. And there are those costs as well in relation to staff costs, 309,000 and 376,000 in 2015 related to member network travel. That was the 2015 figure. It's roughly the same for the 2016 figures as well. And this is the support structure to support the member networks, but we also have duplication in terms of the boards and the support structures there as well. So that's the context. Now what I'd like to do is talk to you about the branches and our proposals in relation to that. So our branches provide local services to local members, and in terms of the society branches we have 11, so 8 within England and 3 within the devolved nations. We also have 29 divisional branches and 29 faculty branches as well. So overall we have a huge number of geographic splits within the organisation. The society branches do not relate to the divisional branches. For example, the Division of Clinical Psychology branches were reorganised to relate to Strategic Health Authority boundaries. Those no longer exist. We then have the faculty branches as well, which are different to the DCP branches, so we have different pockets of activity being carved in the country. What we're suggesting is that there are going to be 2 types of geographic networks: BPS branches and nations as well. So if I take those ideas a little bit further, the BPS branch, you become a member of a society branch as part of your membership, and this is supporting every psychologist, and it provides these opportunities here. So you have networking opportunities, there are public engagement events, student engagement, we provide professional development, communications including newsletters, social media, and the local awards, grant schemes and bursary schemes. And so what we're suggesting is that throughout the UK, and that includes the home nations, there will be these BPS branches. Additionally, in the devolved nations, there will be another structure which we're calling BPS Devolved Nations, and these will have a policy function which will be linked to the boards. In Nicola's presentation she talked about the nation chairs being members of the Senate, and there will be representation on the boards as well. And it's an opportunity to influence policy at the level of devolved governments and with national policy structures as well. So we're splitting that distinct function out so it has its own structure in order to deliver those services. With the network branches, so that's the 58 which relate to the divisional branches and also to the faculty branches as well, we're suggesting that those and the society branches are merged into this new structure. And the funding and support of the work streams for the BPS branches and nations will come through those new structures. The branches, the current society branches, cover in practical areas at the moment, and as a response to that, what we are seeing is that our society branches are setting up hubs in order to resolve that geography. And so what we need to do is look at how we can best harness the energy and enthusiasm and support and add to that. As I said previously, a lot of the branches, how their boundaries are set up, the divisional branches, society branches are no longer relevant. And so we need to have a look at the new needs of our members to make sure they make sense, that we have local services for local members, and also there's local influencing as well. And so what we're saying is that we will be localising the support for our local members. We have done a lot of benchmarking, and we looked at various organisations to see how they split the country. And this is one of our proposals for the society. And what we're looking at is redrawing the branches. And in England, increasing the number of branches in answer to geography. We've looked at different, as I said, organisations. For example, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, they have 11 regions. The midwives, they have 70 branches. So there's a lot of difference, and it does depend on relation to the distribution and size of the membership in terms of organisation. So with the boundaries we're suggesting would provide 14 English branches, and with that there would be support as well, additional support. We also need to consider the local branches in the devolved nations as well, and that's something we're actively looking at. For example, there would more than likely be 2 branches in Wales, North and South Wales, because the geography between there is difficult, very difficult. The outcome of this is we want to provide local services to local members. Now, previously, there has been a lot of, there's a lot of variety in what happens within the different branches, and also activity as well, and how that service delivery happens. For example, some society branches will be more active than the divisional branches, which might be more active than the faculty branches, but it could be the other way around as well. And what we want to do is to be able to open up those fantastic services which all of those committees and active members provide, so that they are widely available for all different members. We would also want to have more coherent national structures for that externally facing policy work as well, but able to draw upon that local expertise within the nations as well. And yes, it will mean that there will be a reduction of the number of regional networks by merging those 58 branches, which are faculty and divisional branches, and the 11 society branches into this new structure.
Divisions, sections and special groups. What we have at the moment are 3 different types of networks that are concerned with either the knowledge and training of the members, professional background of members, or the context in which the members work. So under the existing definitions within the statutes, a division is a group whose members have a professional training in common. A special group is a group where members have a professional context in common, and a section is a group where people have a shared research interest or a particular area of scientific interest from the discipline. In practice, those differences have become quite blurred over the years. So we have some sections, for example, crisis, disaster and trauma, which has a lot of practitioner members that really have a working context in common, and are much more like a special group. But they're a section in our current terminology. We have the special group in coaching psychology, which is actually in every respect operating in the same way as the divisions operate, except that there isn't a professional training route or a single professional training route for coaching psychology. We have a division of teachers, researchers and academics, who in many ways should really be a special group by the current definition. Part of the difficulty with that is we've got parity of esteem issues between the different groups that don't really serve anybody's interests. And also, when we looked actually functionally at what all of those networks were doing, we did some analysis of their current activities, their activities over a number of years. We checked that by the lead from the group that was looking at that, went out and spoke to a number of network chairs to kind of sense check what we thought people were doing. Actually, what we found is that functionally there is no difference between these groups. In terms of what they're delivering to their members, what they're engaged in, it's the same thing. Where we find the difference is in the scope and size. So our big networks, which tend to be our divisions, are doing more, but they're doing the same kinds of things as our sections and special groups do. So what are the things that those groups are doing? Well, they run conferences, symposia, scientific meetings for their members. They support excellence through professional development and networking, events and online resources, publications, and they have schemes for awarding grants, bursaries, and recognising excellence through awards. All of our networks at the moment, all of those sections, special groups and divisions are doing some combination of those things. And that's the stuff that we know our members value. One of the challenges for me throughout this review as Director of Membership Services is how we can actually make everything work better without losing any of that benefit to members. So we wanted to kind of analyse what those benefits were and protect those. So we're using a working title of knowledge and context groups to differentiate between these kinds of groups and the geographic groups that we were talking about. But actually, in terms of nomenclature, we are going down a route of thinking BPS clinical psychology or BPS cognitive psychology. We've also got the faculties and interest groups, and we've done quite a lot of work. We've had a number of workshops with members of faculty committees to discuss what those groups do and get a sense of what's important, and really review the positions of those. So just to confirm what these groups are, the faculties are mostly faculties of the Division of Clinical Psychology, and they represent particular areas of practice. Counselling, because if you are a faculty in the DCP, your membership criteria is such for most faculties that you have to be a full member of the DCP to be a full member of the faculty. Counselling psychologists felt excluded from that. They could be associate members, but they couldn't fully participate. So they've also established a number of what they call network and interest groups, but functionally they're the same thing as the faculties. And actually we've also noticed there was no functional difference between the faculties and interest groups and the special groups of the society. It's just about where they sat in the hierarchy. We have a problem. Much of the expertise sits in those faculties and interest groups. If we really want the professional practice board or practice board to approve a document about what good looks like in child and adolescent services, we don't necessarily have anybody on that board who's ever worked in child and adolescent services. What we have with the faculties sitting in divisions is we are separating the expertise of our members who really know and understand those contexts 2 steps away from any of the decision-making bits of the organisation. And that's a problem. That's a problem for the whole organisation. It also is creating frustration in those faculties because they don't feel that they're listened to. They don't feel heard, and they don't feel that the effort that they're putting in is actually paying the dividend that it should pay. So we want faculties and interest groups to have a more effective voice in the society as well as a more effective voice for the society. We want that expertise to be front and centre. We want much closer links between the faculties and the strategy boards and the Senate, the bits of the organisation that we envisage really driving forward the strategy and the policy priorities. We also want to be able to encourage that collaboration across fields. One of the most exciting things anybody's come to me about recently is say, I want to run a cross-network group looking at the problem that we have with the suicide rates for children and young people in detention. And actually, it was quite hard work to sit down with that person and identify all the different groups across the society that genuinely should be involved in that piece of work. But there are several, and they're all tucked away inside other little groups. So fostering that greater collaboration and being operationally more effective, really valuing that input from our members. So it's not an easy problem to solve, and we know that people feel very strongly identified with these groups and with the group that they're closest to in terms of their practice, but also their professional background. However, we are recommending that those subgroups, those faculties and network groups, should actually be elevated to the same status as the other main networks, the division, special group sections. We want to give them a voice on the boards and on Senate by that elevation. We want to transition to have one layer of member networks equally valued as opposed to having all of these sub-layers nestled under other groups. So, how do we think we can achieve that? Well, this is not going to be easy, and it will be our first effort in getting all of these networks to really collaborate together. Because we do think that it makes sense to merge oncology and palliative care with cancer and palliative care. We do think that it makes sense to working with young people in counselling division with children, young people and their families in clinical psychology. And some of those are really obvious links to make. There are some others that might be a bit less obvious. For us, it might seem like it makes perfect sense to merge qualitative methods with quantitative methods. We know if we speak to the people in each of those sections that it makes no sense to them at all. And actually, having had a lot of those discussions, I'm now beginning to understand why it doesn't make sense. But these are the discussions that we need to have and facilitate members having. Because we're not going to stand here top down and tell you, you have to join with that group. What we're going to do is ask you to talk to each other to decide which relationships make sense. Now, one of the things that AJ pointed out with her slides is we do have some ridiculously small groups. Actually, the group that's got 11 members, I think, is a geographic subgroup of a special interest network. But we also have some really valuable groups that are serving perhaps minority interests. So, for example, HIV and sexual health is a really important faculty within the DCP. It's only got about 75 members. That's not because it's not important, that's because there's a relatively small number of psychologists working in that area, and there will only be a relatively small number of psychologists working in that area, but we still need to be able to support them. However, it's very difficult for the organisation to effectively support a network that's small. So we'll be helping them to find a home, perhaps in clinical health, for example, where they can be supported as a work stream and still deliver those publications and conferences to members with that particular working context, but be part of a bigger group as well to deliver some of the broader benefits to their members of being part of a slightly bigger group. And we also need to think about if we need new groups to fill gaps in provision. So we've got lots of faculties, but we haven't got an adult mental health group anywhere. And there's maybe lots of historical reasons why we don't, but we think we're probably poorer for that mission. And as psychology develops as a profession and as a discipline, we will know that there are new areas that develop that we need to be able to support. So, just to kind of summarise before I go on to the next bit, what we're looking at is groups, which is a working title we're calling knowledge and context groups, which effectively fulfil almost all of the current remits of divisions, special groups, sections, faculties and interest groups. And we're looking at ways that we can facilitate merging of some of those groups into groups that make sense to their members. But there is an area of work which over a number of years has emerged in each of the divisions very specifically. And that is something we're broadly terming professional body. What we mean by that is two things. We mean the public influencing strategy, and we mean support for members at a kind of local and even individual level. We've had quite a lot of feedback, and what our members are saying to us is that they want an organisation which advocates for the profession and the contribution that it makes. They want us to be working hard to make sure that the policymakers and commissioners and government understand that they need psychology and what they need to have in terms of psychology provision for the public good. They want us to promote the standards and guidance in the context in which psychologists work. Now, that can be anything from a university which is trying to encourage its academics to ignore BPS ethical standards, which is a case that recently I've been approached about. Or it could be about a commissioner of service not understanding what they need in terms of psychology expertise and provision for particular kinds of services. It could be something that's at a national level, or it could be something that's quite specifically related to a local need. But our members want us to be doing that. They want us to promote effective workplaces, and they want us to promote the standards for best practice. We know that our members are demanding that because we've had feedback from divisional representatives through the consultation workshops that we've run. We've had feedback through a number of consultation exercises. We've had informal feedback from members just contacting us about issues that they're having. And then, of course, the Division of Clinical Psychology also ran its survey, which provided a lot of qualitative data, which we did plough through to pick out these themes that the members were saying this is what they want from the professional body. We know that currently we're not very effective at it, and there's a number of reasons that we think that is. Its own professional support, where it exists, has evolved as a function in some divisions, but not all. And those divisions are operating in isolation from each other. That might mean that in some areas a commissioner is getting 4 different people giving them slightly different advice about what good looks like in psychology services. That's a confusing message and it doesn't serve us well. We also know that boards and networks produce policy statements and guidance documents, but we don't actually have the resource to promote those at the moment at the local level. That isn't something that we've prioritised. We've made them available, and there's been some work done through our policy consultants to promote those at the national level, but that isn't filtering down, and we've kind of left members to do that for themselves. So, we have looked at 4 different options for a professional body function. I should emphasise that in terms of the national picture, we envisage the Public Affairs Board that Nicola talked about earlier as being absolutely key in driving forward that national strategy, in the maximising the impact of psychology at the national level in each of the 4 nations. And that the promotion through our policy consultants and our policy team to actually push forward those priority areas. But there's also something to do at the local level in terms of actual support to our members where they are. So we did look at just actually having a staffed unit that had the responsibility of doing that, of being available to go and support members locally for building relationships and so forth with commissioners and trust managers and those things. But we got a very strong sense that members felt they wanted to be able to join the network and have a say in the running of the network that would be doing that. We looked at the other end of the scale as setting up an arm's length body as a kind of PLC that would be free of some of the charity constraints but would be able to operate quite independently. In the end, we felt that the benefit from that model didn't outweigh the risks, and by risks I mean the security of the resourcing for it. So it's still on the table, but it's not our preferred option. We looked at the possibility of actually just giving those networks that are predominantly for practitioner members, giving them that responsibility for their members. But the drawback for that is that we still have the duplication, the resource to support that is therefore spread thinly across all of those networks, and we still get the issue with getting 5 different messages being given to the same policymaker, who, if confused by that, is likely to ignore them all. So what we're recommending is a single professional body network that members can join, chartered members can join, that will be supported by a dedicated staffed unit. And this bit here about making use of the branch structure, we don't mean that it's delivered through the branches. What we mean is we know that our branches as a repository of local expertise can inform the work. So what we hope the outcome of that would be that the function will be consolidated in one unit, and that allows us to get the best from the expertise and the resource that we've got there. It allows for that more consistent approach. And by having it as a network that any chartered members can join, we can have those discussions in-house about what the message should be and hear all the voices and then give a message, even if it's quite a complex message, give one message out to the people we need to influence about local policy. So that's all I want to say about the professional body bit. The other thing we wanted to highlight was that this is part of a process. We haven't got to the end of that process yet. So we know we need to review our decision-making and operational processes. That will involve us having a structure that makes sense and processes that are designed for the structure that we have, not tried to impose something from a different model onto what the structure that we eventually agree on. We need to look again at our financial and subscription models and make sure that they actually support driving the business of the society forward, as opposed to perhaps being a barrier, which they could be if they're not designed specifically for the structure that we are developing. And we also need to review our governing documents to make sure that they fit the modern purposes of the society, to make sure that they enable us to move forward over the next 50 years to deliver the kind of society that we want to deliver. So.
Well, I think what matters to us at the moment is trying to get a good shape for a future society, and doing that in a way that brings you, our members, with us, and actually builds a solid platform for the future. And that's why we're here. So, can I just say thank you very much for your time and for your contributions? Very, very helpful. Thank you.